America has always lived through its stories. The frontier myth, the dream of manifest destiny, the belief that every mystery had a hero and every hero had a purpose. But what if those stories were not born naturally? What if they were carefully planted, polished, and rehearsed, as if someone wanted the country to believe a very specific version of itself? This was the question that haunted investigative historian Dr. Samuel Burns, a man who spent decades studying the cultural signatures behind American folklore, national legends, and political narratives. He never believed myths appeared on their own. He believed someone wrote them. And one cold evening in 2023, deep in the basement of an abandoned library in Washington, D.C., Samuel finally found something that changed everything. A single box, unlabeled, dust-covered, hidden behind fallen shelves. Inside were hundreds of thin documents stamped with one identical marking: Narrative Department, N-97. And suddenly, the American story didn't feel so American anymore. Every cell in Samuel's body tensed, because if these documents were real, someone had been designing the nation's myths long before the nation ever believed them. He turned the first page and whispered, "Who wrote America?" Samuel took the documents back to his office, locking the door behind him. The pages contained strange categories: public dreams, acceptable fears, hero templates, national memory adjustments. Each file referenced events from different decades: the Cold War, the space race, the civil rights movement, the oil crisis, even local small-town stories that had mysteriously risen to nationwide recognition. At first glance, they seemed random, but to Samuel, one pattern stood out immediately. Every American myth, good, bad, or legendary, shared the same structure. 1. A tragic spark. 2. A heroic figure. 3. A simple enemy. 4. A moral victory. 5. A unifying national message. And every file ended with the same chilling phrase: if the public believes the story becomes real. Samuel leaned back, breath caught in his throat. Someone, somewhere, was not just documenting history. They were manufacturing it. But what scared him more was the timeline. The files dated back to 1790, meaning the project started barely a decade after America was founded. Meaning this wasn't a temporary program. It was the foundation. One file in particular looked older than the others. Yellowed paper, burned corners, ink faded. It was titled Prototype Myth, Case Study Number 001. Samuel read the first paragraph and froze. It wasn't about a war. It wasn't about freedom. It was about a man, an unnamed soldier during the Revolutionary era, whose entire story had been rewritten, polished, and prepared to become a national symbol. The document described him as a vessel for patriotism, a prototype for future narratives, a figure the people can imprint upon. And at the bottom of the page, written in smaller ink, funded by Committee of Perception Architects, Room 12. Samuel's heartbeat quickened. Perception Architects? He had never heard of such a committee. No historian had. Which meant one thing: this wasn't a public department. This wasn't even a secret department. This was something deeper, something designed to remain invisible. Samuel flipped the page and found a diagram, a map of emotions, a blueprint for controlling national mood, a formula for myth creation. His hands trembled, because the formula wasn't about storytelling. It was about psychological engineering. Every file Samuel opened next made the situation worse. There was a report about the 1920s American Dream movement, engineered sentiment to counter nationwide pessimism. A file on the 1950s space mythos, designed to unify the country against a cosmic unknown. A file describing how specific local legends were intentionally amplified to create regional pride. And then, he found a black envelope, sealed. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You should not have come this far." The air in the room felt colder. The lights flickered. Samuel's eyes darted to the door. Someone knew exactly what he was reading. Someone was watching. He checked the box again. One file remained at the bottom, heavier than the rest. Stamped in red, "Restricted, N-197, will not continue." He opened it. The final page revealed the truth he feared most. The American myths weren't isolated stories. They were chapters of one narrative, one long script, one continuous psychological operation. N-197, the unified belief framework. And below it, everything the public believes must feel like their own discovery. Samuel's mouth went dry. He whispered, "They didn't just shape our stories. They shaped us." Weeks later, Samuel learned that someone else had accessed similar documents decades before him. An anonymous whistleblower known only by the initials H.W. This person had secretly leaked fragments to several newspapers in the early 1970s. But every story was buried before publication. Editors withdrew, agencies stepped in, reporters vanished. But one thing survived. A note attributed to H.W., mailed anonymously in 1974. "There is no American myth. There is one myth, endlessly rewritten." Samuel understood now. Each decade wasn't a new chapter in American history. It was a new version of the same myth, repackaged, repurposed, retold. Heroism, threat, unity, fear, triumph, a cycle. And if the cycle had continued into 2023, what was the next chapter? At the back of the folder was a date. Scheduled narrative shift, January 17th, 2024. Below it, theme, collapse, reconstruction. Samuel stared at it, horrified. They weren't just creating myths. They were preparing the next one. A national reset, a narrative collapse, a rewrite of the entire American identity. He read the last line again. "When the myth collapses, the public will search for a new story. We will provide it." Samuel closed the folder slowly, his breathing unsteady, his hands ice cold. Because for the first time, he understood that America might not be what it believed it was. And maybe it never had been. 3 days later, Dr. Samuel Burns disappeared from his home. Laptop open, dinner unfinished, front door unlocked. On his desk, investigators found a single sheet of paper. 4 words. It was all true. The box containing the N-197 files was gone, and experts claim that dozens of online archives containing Samuel's earlier research were mysteriously erased within hours. No one knows who deleted them. No one knows who took the files. No one knows who Samuel actually contacted in the days before his disappearance. But one thing is certain. Every myth has a beginning. Every myth has a purpose. Every myth has an architect, and sometimes the architect erases the witnesses. But if the American myth was only a single story, the question remains: what happens when the story writer runs out of ink? Or worse, what if they're already writing the next chapter? What Samuel Burns found: only 4 words remained on the desk. It was all true. The N-97 files are gone. Samuel is gone. But the questions linger. How long has America been written? Who are the perception architects? What comes after the myth collapses? Nothing was coincidence. Subscribe. Turn on notifications.